Ambassador Quinva stood before the council chambers, her translucent skin flickering with colors that showed her fear. She had served the Valthine Confederation for 60 cycles, but never had she faced a decision like this. Behind her, the holographic display showed the latest casualty reports. 3 more colonies lost. 4 million dead. The Krellis swarm was winning. You want us to contact the humans? Council Elder Vrethan spoke with disbelief. His tendrils curled inward, a sign of deep concern among their people. The species that wages war on itself? The ones who make weapons for sport? Quinva nodded slowly. She had studied the broadcasts from Earth, watched their history unfold through the transmissions they sent into space. It was horrifying. While the Valthine had achieved peace 5,000 years ago, humans were still fighting each other in the year they called 2156. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They created songs about battle. They built monuments to their wars. They are violent, yes, Quinva said. But they are also survivors. In all our research, we have never found another species like them. They do not give up. They do not surrender. And most important, they win. The council chamber fell silent. Through the tall windows, they could see the night sky of their capital world. Once, it had been filled with the gentle lights of peaceful trade ships. Now, it was crossed by military vessels on constant patrol, waiting for the next Kreloth attack. General Lethar stepped forward. His armor was scorched from the last battle, and he carried himself with the weariness of someone who had seen too much death. The ambassador is right. I have fought the swarm for 10 years. We have better weapons. We have better shields. We have better technology in every way. But we are losing. How is that possible? Another council member asked. Lethar's voice was bitter. Because technology does not win wars. Will does. The Krelith will throw 1 million soldiers at us to take one position. They do not care about losses. They do not mourn their dead. They simply keep coming. He paused, his eyes meeting each council member's gaze. We do not think like warriors. We think like scholars. And scholars do not win against swarms. Quinva activated another holographic display. It showed a human soldier, recorded from one of their historical broadcasts. The soldier was young, maybe 20 Earth years. He was covered in dirt and blood, but he was smiling. The caption read, Marine returns from successful mission. Successful meant he had survived when many had not. Look at him, Quinva said. Humans celebrate survival. They honor violence. They train for war from childhood through games and stories. Their entertainment is filled with conflict. When we show our children stories of harmony, they show their stories of struggle and victory. That sounds primitive, Vrethan said. It is primitive, Quinva agreed. But primitives sometimes survive when the civilized do not. The debate went on for hours. Some council members argued that inviting humans would be inviting chaos. Others said that any species so violent would simply take what they wanted and leave the Valthine worse off than before. A few suggested that it would be better to die with dignity than to be saved by savages. Finally, General Lethar spoke again. I have lost 3 million soldiers in this war. Good people. Scientists who learned to hold weapons. Artists who became gunners. Teachers who died protecting evacuation ships. His voice broke. They were never meant to fight. We are not warriors. We never were. And now we are paying the price for 10,000 years of peace. He pulled up another image. This one showed the Krellis swarm in action. Millions of insect-like creatures, each the size of a large predator, flowing across a planet's surface like a living tide. They destroyed everything in their path. They took no prisoners. They made no treaties. The swarm does not care about our philosophy, Lethar said. They do not care that we are enlightened or peaceful or civilized. They only understand strength, and they have more of it than we do. He looked around the chamber. Unless we find someone stronger. The vote was close. In the end, fear of extinction won over fear of humans. The council authorized Quinva to make contact. She sat alone in the communications room, her hands shaking as she prepared the message. The humans had responded to greetings from dozens of species over the past 2 years. They were friendly enough, curious, eager to trade and share information. But no one had ever asked them for military help before. Quinva thought carefully about her words. She knew that humans valued directness, something the Valthene usually avoided. She crafted a simple message. We are the Valthene Confederation. We are being destroyed by an enemy we cannot defeat. We need soldiers. Will you help? She transmitted it through the quantum relay network and waited. The response came in less than an hour. That alone shocked her. The Valthene Council would have debated for weeks. Humans answered almost immediately. The message was even shorter than hers. Send coordinates. Marines inbound. Quinva felt a wave of relief, followed quickly by terror. What had she just done? She had invited the most violent species known to the galaxy to their homeworld. She had given them coordinates to every Valthene military installation. If the humans decided to conquer rather than help, there would be nothing the Confederation could do to stop them. She returned to the council to report. General Leth R asked the question everyone was thinking. How many are they sending? Quinva checked the follow-up transmission. They are sending 5,000 in the first wave. They call them Marines. They say more will come if needed. 5,000? Rethan laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The swarm has millions. What can 5,000 do? But General Lethar was not laughing. He had studied the human military broadcasts more than anyone. He had watched their wars, analyzed their tactics, tried to understand their way of thinking. I have seen what a single human squad can do when they decide to fight, he said quietly. 5,000 might be enough. 3 days later, the human ships arrived. They did not come through normal space. They tore holes in reality itself, emerging in flashes of twisted light that made Valthene sensors scream. The ships were ugly compared to Valthene vessels. They had no elegant curves or artistic designs. They looked like what they were. Weapons, built to survive and deal damage. General Lethar went to meet them at the orbital station. His staff were nervous, whispering among themselves. What would these humans be like in person? Would they be as frightening as their reputation? The airlock opened, and smoke poured out. Actual smoke from some chemical process the humans used. Through that smoke, figures emerged. They were smaller than Lethar expected. Shorter than Valthene, bulkier in build. They wore armor that looked heavy and crude, that moved with a grace that suggested the armor was as natural to them as skin. Their faces were exposed, and those faces were terrifying not because they were monstrous, but because they were so clearly predatory. Forward-facing eyes. Flat teeth for grinding, but strong jaws for tearing. Muscles that moved under their skin like coiled springs. These were hunters, killers, survivors. The lead human removed his helmet. His name tag read Hyan. He smiled, showing those flat teeth, and extended his hand in the human greeting. General Lethar? Hyan asked. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Staff Sergeant Hyan, United Earth Marine Corps. We got your message. He looked around at the damaged station, at the Valthene soldiers with their haunted eyes. Looks like we got here just in time. Lethar took the human's hand, felt the strength in that grip, and thought, we have either just been saved, or we have invited something far more dangerous than the swarm into our home. Only time would tell which. Staff Sergeant Hyan had been in combat zones before, but never one like this. The The Valthene outpost looked like something from a history book, back when humans still built beautiful things just because they could. Tall spires made of materials that seemed to glow from within. Gardens that somehow survived in space. Art everywhere, even on the military buildings. Then he saw the damage. Burn marks across those beautiful walls. Holes punched through the spires. The gardens torn apart by weapons fire. The Krelleth had been here. Corporal Nari, Hyan said into his cum. How many wounded? Dozens, Sergeant, Nari's voice came back. She was already at the medical station, working alongside Valthene doctors. Their injuries are bad. The Krelleth weapons do something to the tissue. It doesn't heal right. Hyan nodded, watching as his squad spread out through the outpost. They moved like they had trained to move, checking corners, securing positions, working as one unit. The Valthene soldiers watched them with something like awe. General Lethar approached, his translator device making his words sound formal and stiff. Sergeant Hyan, we are grateful for your arrival. I have prepared quarters for your troops, and an alarm cut him off. Loud, piercing, the kind of sound that meant only one thing. Contact, Hyan said, his demeanor changing instantly. He was no longer the friendly foreign soldier. He was a Marine, and Marines had work to do. General, get your people to shelter. Nari, secure the wounded. Everyone else, defensive positions. This is not a drill. The Valthene officers looked confused. Get to shelter? They were soldiers. They should fight. But General Lethar had read enough about human tactics to know better. Do as he says, Lethar ordered. Now, Hyan's tactical display lit up with enemy contacts. A lot of them. The Krelleth were coming in fast, at least 200 hostiles. Standard raiding party. They probably expected to find the same demoralized Valthene defenders they always found. Instead, they found humans. Private Tai Yang set up his heavy weapon on the main approach. The Dun looked enormous, almost as big as he was, but he handled it like it weighed nothing. Beside him, the other Marines took cover and prepared to fire. Here they come, Tai Yang said calmly. Like he was commenting on the weather, the Krelleth burst through the perimeter like a wave of claws and teeth. They were huge, each one easily the size of a human vehicle. Their exoskeletons were thick armor. Their mandibles could crush steel. They moved fast, using both their legs and their arms to run in a way that looked wrong to human eyes. They also made a terrible sound, something between a scream and a clicking noise that was meant to terrify their prey. Light them up, Hyan ordered. The humans opened fire, and the Krelleth learned what terror really meant. Tai Yang's heavy gun roared, sending explosive rounds into the charging swarm. Each round hit like a small bomb, tearing through chitin armor and the soft flesh beneath. The Krelleth in the front lines simply came apart, their bodies destroyed by weapons designed to stop things much tougher than bugs. The other Marines fired in controlled bursts, their rifles cracking with a sound that echoed through the outpost. They did not panic. They did not run. They stood their ground and killed anything that came close. A Krelleth warrior made it past the initial fire, its claws reaching for Hyan. He moved like he had done this 1,000 times before. Doc Roll come up with his sidearm out. 3 shots, each one finding a weak point in the creature's armor. It fell, twitching, at his feet. Reload, someone called out. Covering. Another Marine responded immediately. They worked together like parts of a machine, each one knowing exactly what the others would do. When one stopped to reload, another kept firing. When one moved, another covered the movement. The Krelleth had numbers, but the humans had something better. They had practice. The entire fight lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, the Krelleth were either dead or running away. The ones that ran moved differently than they had when attacking. They moved like creatures that had learned fear. Hyan did a quick count. Anyone hit? Negative, Sergeant, came the responses. He nodded and keyed his comm to the Valthine frequency. General, all clear. You can come out now. General Lethar emerged from cover, his eyes wide. He walked slowly through the battlefield, looking at the Krelloth bodies, at the human soldiers calmly checking their weapons and preparing for the next fight. No one was celebrating. No one seemed excited. They had just killed 200 enemy soldiers, and they acted like it was routine. How? Lethar asked. How did you do that? Hyam looked at him, genuinely confused by the question. Do what, sir? That was 200 Krelloth warriors. 200. We would have needed 1,000 soldiers to hold them off, and we would have lost half of them doing it. You did it with 12 Marines and took no casualties. Hyan seemed to consider this. Sir, we've been fighting wars since before we had written language. We've spent 10,000 years getting good at killing things that want to kill us. He gestured at the dead Krelloth. These things are tough, I'll give them that. But they fight on instinct. They charge straight in. They rely on fear and numbers. And you do not feel fear? Lethar asked. One of the Marines laughed. It was a young woman, her name tag reading Nari. She had already finished treating the few Valthine who had minor injuries and was now checking the human weapons. Oh, we feel fear, General, she said. Fear is what keeps you alive. But we don't let it control us. We train until the fear becomes just background noise. You learn to work through it. Tyang was cleaning his heavy gun, methodically checking each part. The drill instructors had a saying, he added. The more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in combat. We sweat a lot, sir. General Lethar felt something he had not felt in years of fighting the swarm. He felt hope. Over the next several hours, the Marines transformed the outpost. They set up automated defenses. They created kill zones. They established overlapping fields of fire. They turned a vulnerable position into a fortress. Hyan walked with General Lethar, explaining their tactics. The Krelloth will come again. They always do. But next time, we'll be ready. And we'll make them pay for every meter of ground. You sound certain they will attack, Lethar said. They will, Hyan confirmed. We killed their raiding party. That's an insult to them. They'll want revenge. Probably send 3 or 4 times as many next time. This should have been terrifying news. Instead, Hyan was smiling. You want them to attack again, Lethar realized. General, we came here to fight. The Krelloth need to learn that fighting humans is a very bad idea. The best way to teach them that is to make them try it a few more times. Each time, they'll lose more. Each time, they'll get more scared. Eventually, they'll stop trying. That night, the Marines ate rations that smelled terrible to Valthine's senses, laughed and joked with each other, and prepared for the next fight. They cleaned their weapons with care, checked their armor, and got a few hours of sleep. General Lethar watched them and understood something important. The Valthine had been trying to fight a war. The humans were living one. This was not something strange or unusual for them. This was what they did. What they had always done. He remembered Hyan's words from earlier. This is what we do. The general finally understood what the Valthine Confederation had invited into their war. They had not just called for soldiers. They had called for the only species in the known galaxy that had turned warfare into an art form. That had spent thousands of years perfecting the science of survival through violence. The Krelloth swarm had been winning because they were savage and relentless. But now they faced something worse. They faced humans. And humans, as General Lethar was learning, did not lose. Captain Minho arrived with 5,000 Marines, and the Valthine military command was not sure what to make of him. He was young for someone commanding so many troops, maybe 30 Earth years. He smiled easily and spoke with respect. But when he looked at the tactical displays, his eyes went cold and calculating. "Show me everything," he said to General Lethar. "Every battle you fought, every position you've lost, every tactic the Kreleth have used." For 2 days, Minho studied the war. He watched recordings of Kreleth attacks. He examined Valthene defensive positions. He read casualty reports and supply manifests. He barely slept, living on something the humans called coffee that smelled like burning chemicals. Finally, he called a meeting with the Valthene High Command. "You've been fighting this war wrong," he said simply. The Valthene officers shifted uncomfortably. General Lethar remained calm. "Explain." Minho pulled up a holographic display showing a recent Valthene defensive position. "You have amazing weapons. Your shields are better than anything we've ever seen. Your ships can destroy Kreleth vessels from halfway across a solar system." He zoomed in on the position. "So why do you keep losing ground?" "The swarm has superior numbers," one officer said. "No," Minho shook his head. "Numbers matter, but they're not everything. You're losing because you fight defensively. You wait for the Kreleth to attack, then you try to hold them off. Sometimes you succeed. Sometimes you don't, but you never take the fight to them." "We have conducted offensive operations," another officer protested. "You've conducted counterattacks," Minho corrected. "That's not the same thing. When the Kreleth push, you push back. But you never push first. You never attack when they're not expecting it. You never keep them off balance." He brought up another display, this one showing Kreleth territory. "The swarm operates on instinct and momentum. They're like water flowing downhill. They take the path of least resistance. When they hit something hard, they flow around it. When they hit something soft, they crash through it." He smiled. "So we're going to become something they can't flow around or crash through. We're going to become chaos." Over the next week, Minho transformed Valthene military strategy. He paired Marine units with Valthene forces, combining alien technology with human tactics. The results were devastating. Lieutenant Sora ran the Psychological Warfare Division. She was brilliant at understanding how the enemy thought, and she used that knowledge like a weapon. She took footage of Marines in combat, the humans advancing through Kreleth fire without hesitation, and broadcast it through every Kreleth communication channel. They could hack. The swarm had never seen anything like it. They were used to enemies that ran, that retreated, that broke when pushed hard enough. The humans in the videos did not break. They charged forward, firing as they moved, treating overwhelming odds like a personal challenge. SOR added audio to the broadcasts. Human war songs, the kind that Marines sang while marching. The lyrics were about fighting and dying and never giving up. To the Kreleth, who communicated through chemical signals and instinct, the idea of making music about violence was incomprehensible and terrifying. "We're in their heads now," Sora told Minho. "They're starting to hesitate before attacking positions where they know humans are present." "Good," Minho said. "Now let's give them something real to fear." Sergeant Junho was assigned to train Valthene volunteers in close-quarters combat. The aliens struggled with the concept. Their weapons were designed for long range. Their tactics emphasized distance and firepower. The idea of deliberately getting close to the enemy seemed insane. "Why would we do this?" One Valthene soldier asked, his translator making his confusion clear. Junho smiled. He was a big man, even by human standards, with scars that told stories of previous battles. "Because when you get close, you take away their advantages. The Kreleth rely on their numbers and their charge. But in tight spaces, numbers don't matter as much. In tight spaces, skill matters. Training matters. And He gestured to the Marines, helping him train the Valthine. "We have a lot of training." He demonstrated on a practice dummy shaped like a Krelith warrior. "They're fast, they're strong, they're tough. But they have weak points. Here, where the head connects to the body. Here, where the legs joint to the thorax. Here, underneath the jaw plates." His knife found each point with precision. You learn where to strike, and you can drop one of these things with a single hit. The Valthine volunteers practiced hesitantly at first, but Junho was patient, correcting their form, showing them again and again until the movements became natural. By the end of the week, they were moving differently. They walked with confidence. They held their weapons like they knew how to use them. The turning point came at Vareth Station. The Krelith launched their largest offensive in months, sending over 3 million warriors to crush the Valthine defensive line once and for all. Intelligence suggested the swarm was committing everything they had. This was meant to be the final battle. Minho had been waiting for this. The battle began at dawn. The Krelith came in waves, their numbers blotting out the stars. The Valthine defenders, now trained by humans, held the 4 positions. They did not retreat when the swarm charged. They held their ground, pouring fire into the approaching enemy. Behind them, human Marines operated the heavy weapons. Taiyang's gun sang its deadly song, each burst destroying dozens of Krelith. Other Marines coordinated the Valthine artillery, calling strikes with precision that turned charging formations into chaos. The Krelith pushed harder, committing their reserves. This was what Minho had been waiting for. "Now," he said quietly into the com. Valthine orbital platforms positioned over the past week opened fire. They did not target the Krelith front lines. They targeted the rear, cutting off reinforcements and escape routes. At the same time, Marine strike teams that had been hiding in the asteroid field burst through Krelith lines, attacking command centers and communication nodes. The swarm, so used to flowing around obstacles, found themselves trapped. They were being attacked from all sides. Their instinct to charge forward meant they pushed deeper into a killing zone. Their superior numbers became a liability as they crowded together, making themselves easier targets. Minho watched the battle unfold on his displays, making small adjustments, redirecting fire here, moving reserves there. He was calm, almost relaxed. This was what he had trained for his entire life. General Lethar stood beside him, watching in amazement. "You planned this," he said. "You knew they would commit everything. You wanted them to." "Yes, sir," Minho confirmed. The Krelith fight on instinct. They see an opportunity, they take it. So we gave them an opportunity that looked real. They committed to breaking our line, and when they did, we sprang the trap. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Krelith swarm had lost over 1 million warriors. The survivors retreated in disorder, something Valthine observers said they had never seen before. The swarm did not just lose the battle. They broke. Minho gave his troops 4 hours to rest and resupply. Then he called General Lethar. "We're going after them," he said. Lethar was shocked. "Our soldiers are exhausted. We need time to recover." "So do they," Minho said. "Which is why we attack now, while they're confused and scared. We don't give them time to regroup. We don't give them time to plan. We hit them again and again until they can't fight anymore." "This is not how we wage war," Lethar protested. "I know," Minho said, not unkindly. "That's why you were losing." The pursuit began that night. Mixed units of humans and Valthine pushed into Krelith territory, moving fast, hitting hard, never staying in one place long enough for the swarm to organize a response. They destroyed supply depots, demolished communication centers, and killed any warriors they encountered. The Krelith, for the first time in their history, learned what it meant to be hunted, and the hunters were human. The war was turning, but not everyone was celebrating. Corporal Nari sat in the medical bay, her hands shaking as she tried to clean blood from her uniform. It was not her blood. It was from a young Valthine volunteer named HFY, who had died in her arms an hour ago. HFY had been a student before the war. He studied music of all things. Then the humans arrived, and he watched them fight. He saw their courage, their determination, and he decided he wanted to be like them. He volunteered for Sergeant Junho's close combat training. He learned how to fight. He learned how to kill Dot, and today, he learned how to die. "You okay?" Staff Sergeant Hyan asked, sitting down beside her. Nari shook her head. He was just a kid, Hyan. He should have been in school, learning about music, not dying on some battlefield in a war that wasn't even his. "It was his," Hyan said quietly. "The Krellith were destroying his people. He chose to fight." "We taught him to fight," Nari said, her voice sharp. "We taught them all to fight. And now they're volunteering for suicide missions because they think that's what heroes do. They're trying to be like us." She looked at Hyan with tears in her eyes. "What have we done to them? They were peaceful. They built beautiful things and studied the stars and made art. Now they're learning to hate. They're learning to kill. We're changing them, and we can't take it back." Hyan had no answer for her. He had been thinking the same thing for weeks now. The Valthine volunteers were getting braver, which meant they were getting more reckless. They saw how humans fought, how Marines would hold impossible positions and make last stands, and they wanted to prove they could do the same. But they did not have the years of training, the discipline, the experience. They had courage without wisdom, and it was getting them killed. Major Yuna was leading the deep strike operations into Krellith territory. Her teams were small, fast, and deadly. They would slip through enemy lines, destroy important targets, and disappear before the swarm could respond. It was dangerous work, the kind that required perfect coordination and nerves of steel. The Valthine wanted to help with these missions. They volunteered in waves, eager to prove themselves. Yuna had to turn most of them away. She was not being cruel. She was trying to keep them alive. "They don't understand," she told Captain Minho. "They see us take risks, and they think that's normal. They don't see the years of training we had before we ever saw combat. They don't know that every one of these missions is planned down to the second. They just see the action and think they can do it too." Minho nodded. He'd been watching the same thing happen across all the combined units. The Valthine were changing, becoming more aggressive, more willing to fight. It was helping them win the war, but it was costing them their identity. "We're like a virus," Hyan had said to him once. "We spread violence everywhere we go." One of Yuna's missions went wrong. They hit a Krellith command nest, destroyed their target, and were extracting when they ran into a massive patrol. Her team was pinned down, outnumbered 10-1. She called for support. Private Taiyang volunteered to hold the extraction point while the others got to the shuttle. He set up his heavy gun at a choke point, a narrow canyon that the Krellith would have to come through. It was a good defensive position. It was also a death trap. Once the Krellith realized what was happening, they would swarm the position from all sides. "Taiyang, that's a one-way trip," Yuna said over the comm. "I know, ma'am," Taiyang replied. His voice was calm. "But Major, you've got 17 people to get out. I can buy you the time you need." "Negative. We'll find another way." "Ma'am, there is no other way. Not if everyone's going to make it." He paused. "This is what we do, right? We protect our people." "Well, you're my people. All of you." Yuna wanted to order him to fall back, but she knew he was right. Without someone holding that position, the Krellith would catch them before they reached the shuttle. People would die. "Maybe all of them. Make them pay for it," she said finally. "Always do, ma'am." Taiyang held that position for 14 minutes. His gun roared constantly, cutting down Krellith warriors by the dozens. When they tried to flank him, he switched to grenades. When they got close, he used his sidearm. He fought with everything he had, buying precious seconds for his team to escape. His last transmission was simple. Mission complete. Worth it. Then the Krelith overran his position, and Private Tai Yang died doing what Marines do. The news hit the entire combined force hard. It was the first human death in the war. The Valthene were devastated. They had sent thousands of their own people to die, but losing a human, someone who had traveled across the stars to fight for them, who had no reason to be there except that they asked for help, broke something in them. General Lethar organized a memorial service according to human military tradition. He had studied the protocols, wanting to honor Tai Yang properly. The service was simple. A flag draped over an empty casket, representing the body they could not recover. Taps played by a Marine bugler, the mournful notes echoing through the ceremony hall. Hyan performed the flag-folding ceremony, his movements precise and practiced. Each fold had meaning, representing something about sacrifice and service and honor. When he finished, he presented the folded flag to a Valthene officer named Threnva, who had fought beside Tai Yang in the last battle. Threnva took the flag with trembling hands. "Why?" he asked. "Why did he give his life for us? We are not his people. This is not his world. Why?" Hyan looked at him, and for the first time since arriving, the Valthene saw emotion on the human's face. "Because that's who we are," Hyan said. "We don't fight for conquest or glory. We fight for each other. And we decided you were worth fighting for. That makes you our people too." The words spread through the Valthene forces like wildfire. The humans saw them as people worth dying for. Not aliens. Not strangers. People. It changed everything. After the ceremony, Nari found Hyan sitting alone, staring at nothing. She sat beside him in silence. They had both lost friends before. It never got easier. "You were right," Hyan said finally. "We are changing them. We can't help it. War changes everyone it touches. Is it worth it?" Nari asked. "Saving them if we destroy what made them worth saving." Hyan thought about that for a long time. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know the alternative. The Krelith would have killed them all. At least this way, they survive. Maybe in a few generations, when the war is over, they'll find their way back to who they were. Maybe they'll become something new. But at least they'll be alive to make that choice." Nari nodded slowly. Tai Yang would have said the same thing. "Yeah," Hyan agreed. He would have. The war continued. The Valthene fought with new determination, not just for their own survival anymore, but to honor the sacrifice of the human who died for them. They were learning to be warriors, but they were also learning what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. They were learning from humans. And humans, despite all their violence and all their wars, knew one thing very well. Some things were worth dying for. Some people were worth saving. The war did not end with a massive final battle. It ended with a transmission. Captain Minho was reviewing reports when the communication came through. It was on a Krelith frequency, which was unusual. The swarm rarely used complex communications. They operated mostly on pheromones and instinct. But this message was clear and direct. "Human Commander, this is Empress Vekra of the Krelith swarm. We wish to discuss terms." Minho looked at General Lethar, who was standing beside him. The Valthene's skin flickered with colors that showed his shock. In all the years of fighting the swarm, they had never once tried to negotiate. They only knew how to attack or retreat. "Put her through," Minho said. The holographic display activated, showing a Krelith unlike any they had seen before. She was massive, 3 times the size of the warriors. Her chitin was marked with patterns that might have been scars or decorations. Her eyes, compound and alien, fixed on Minho, with what might have been intelligence or might have been hatred. "You are the one called Minho," she said to the translator. "I am. You have defeated 17 of our hive clusters. You have destroyed 43 breeding nests. You have killed over 2 million of our warriors." Her mandibles clicked in what the translator interpreted as frustration. "We cannot win this war." "No," Minho agreed simply. "You cannot." "We do not understand you," Vecra continued. "We have fought many species. All of them break when we push hard enough. All of them run when the cost becomes too high. But you humans, you do not break. You do not run. We kill one of you, and 10 more charge forward. We destroy your position, and you attack from another direction. You accept death like it means nothing." "Death means everything," Minho corrected her. "That's why we fight so hard to make it count." The Empress was silent for a moment, trying to process this. "We submit to the humans. Tell us your terms. How much of our territory do you claim? How many of our worlds will you take?" Minho glanced at General Lethar, then back at the Empress. "I think you misunderstand the situation. We didn't fight this war for conquest. We fought it because our allies asked for help." He gestured to Lethar. "You're not surrendering to Earth. You're surrendering to the Valthene Confederation. They will set the terms. We're just here to make sure you honor whatever agreement you reach." Vecra's confusion was obvious, even through the translation and across species. "You could take what you want. You have the power. We cannot stop you." "We could," Minho agreed. "But we won't. That's not why we came." For the first time in recorded Krelith history, an Empress had nothing to say. The negotiations took 3 weeks. The Valthene, with human advisors, established a militarized zone between Confederation and Swarm space. The Krelith would return all occupied territory. They would pay reparations in resources and labor. Most importantly, they would stop their expansion. Any violation would bring the humans back. The galaxy watched these negotiations with intense interest. Every species had heard about the humans by now. The violent species that fought wars for sport. The aggressive newcomers who had military technology that scared everyone. And now, those same humans had won a war and were giving the victory to someone else. It changed how the galaxy saw Earth. Humanity was dangerous. Yes, but they were dangerous in a controlled way. They could be brutal enemies, but they could also be loyal allies. And they did not conquer for the sake of conquest. The war officially ended on a cold morning at the Valthene capital. Staff Sergeant Hyan stood beside General Lethar at a memorial they had built together. It was a simple monument, listing the names of everyone who had died in the war. Valthene names filled most of the wall, thousands of them. Human names were fewer, but each one represented someone who had died far from home, fighting for people they had never met before. Taiyang's name was there, carved deep into the stone. "What will your people do now?" Lethar asked. "Will you return to Earth?" Hyan looked up at the sky, at the stars that humans had dreamed about for thousands of years. They had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they were not, and they had learned that the universe needed them. "Some will go home," Hyan said, "but many will stay. We've been offered positions as trainers, advisors, peacekeepers. Your government wants us to help build a proper military, one that can defend itself if the Krelith ever break the treaty." "And you?" Lethar asked. "What will you do?" Hyan smiled. "I'll stay for a while. Make sure the job's done right. Marines don't leave until the mission is complete." Across Valthene space, similar conversations were happening. Humans were integrating into the Confederation's military structure, not as conquerors, but as partners. They taught tactics and strategy. They trained soldiers. They shared the hard lessons learned from 10,000 years of human warfare, but they also learned from the Valthene. They saw the beauty of a civilization that had chosen peace for so long. They experienced art and philosophy that humans had never imagined. They learned that strength was not just about fighting, but also about knowing when not to fight. Lieutenant Sora was offered a position running the Confederation's intelligence division. She accepted on the condition that she could bring in more human analysts. "You have amazing technology," she told the Valthine commanders. "But you don't think like warriors. You need people who can anticipate how enemies will act, predict their moves. We can teach you that." Sergeant Junho opened a training academy that taught mixed combat techniques, combining Valthine precision with human aggression. His students came from 6 different species, all of them wanting to learn from the humans who had defeated the swarm. Major Yuna continued running special operations, but now her teams were mixed units. Humans and Valthine working together, using the best of both species. They became legendary across the sector, the team you called when the situation was impossible. Corporal Nari stayed at the main hospital, treating wounded from all species. She never forgot her conversation with Hyan about how war changed people. She saw it every day in the Valthine volunteers who came through her medical bay. But she also saw something else. She saw them learning to value their own lives more, to fight smarter, to survive. The violence had cost them their innocence, but it had given them strength. 6 months after the war ended, humanity was contacted by another species. The Threen Collective, a small alliance on the other side of the galaxy. They were being attacked by pirates and needed help. The message they sent was simple. "We have heard of Earth's Marines. Will you help us?" The answer came from Fleet Admiral Park back on Earth. The same answer that had started everything. Send coordinates. Marines inbound. The galaxy was learning something important. There was a new player in galactic politics, and they operated by different rules. They were violent when violence was needed. They were merciful when mercy was appropriate. They fought for their allies and honored their agreements. They were human, and humans did not abandon people who called for help. At the memorial, General Lethar placed a hand on Hyan's shoulder. It was a human gesture, one he had learned from the Marines. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. For answering when we called. For teaching us to fight. For dying for us." Hyan looked at Taiyang's name on the wall. "That's what Marines do, sir. Someone calls for help, we answer. Doesn't matter if they're human or alien. Doesn't matter if we know them or not. If they need help, we come. Will you always come?" Lethar asked. "If we call again, will Earth answer?" Hyan smiled. "General, the galaxy called for help, and Marines stepped through the smoke. That line's still open. It'll always be open." They looked out at the peaceful city, rebuilt after the war. At the Valthine walking the streets safely, no longer fearing attack from the sky. At the future that had been bought with blood and sacrifice and courage. "Besides," Hyan added, "we made a promise to Taiyang and all the others who died. We said we'd see this through, make sure you stayed safe. Marines don't break promises." The smoke of war had cleared, revealing a galaxy forever changed. The Krellith had learned fear. The Valthine had learned strength. And humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Some called them warriors. Others called them heroes. The humans called themselves something simpler. They were Marines, and Marines never left anyone behind.